Imagine writing the most complex, sprawling, just massive 20-minute rock epics in the world.
Right, these huge mythological concepts.
Exactly. You're playing to sold-out arenas, delivering these dense narratives draped over constantly shifting time signatures.
You're at the very top of a very demanding musical mountain.
You really are.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, deciding your very survival depends on sounding like, Dean Martin in a drunken stupor.
Yeah.
Or writing a 3-minute pop song about a guy having a nervous breakdown inside a snowman suit.
It's a total reinvention, right? And it's born out of absolute desperation. The whole playbook gets thrown out because the parameters of their reality just completely shifted.
That is exactly the counterintuitive reality we were exploring today for you. We're diving deep into the pivotal 1978 album, and then there were 3 by Genesis.
A massively important album.
Oh, absolutely. And our mission here isn't just to, read off the track list. We really want to uncover how a major creative crisis, specifically losing a core band member who defined your entire sound forces, a total architectural redesign of a band's identity.
Which is a fascinating process to watch unfold.
It really is. So we're going to dig into the studio mechanisms, the shifting cultural landscape of the late 70s, and the pretty brutal personal toll of this transition.
We want to show how profound loss actually served as the springboard for a massive commercial and artistic breakthrough.
Because the stakes for this specific moment in music history are, frankly, incredibly high.
They really are. You have to look at the musical landscape of 1977 and 1978. It's shifting seismically beneath everyone's feet.
Punk is happening.
Exactly. Genesis, at this point, is a global force, known for all this intricate musicianship, but the cultural vanguard is actively turning hostile toward their entire genre.
Right. Prog rock is suddenly the enemy.
Totally. And internally, the band is standing at a brutal crossroads. They aren't just trying to record their 9th studio album. They are trying to prove they still have a right to exist.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the fracture itself. So it's August 1977.
Right.
The Genesis lineup is a 5-man operation when they're on the road, but a 4-man creative engine in the studio. You've got Phil Collins on drums and vocals, Tony Banks on keyboards.
Mike Rutherford on bass and rhythm guitar.
Yeah, and Steve Hackett on lead guitar.
Mm.
So they've just wrapped the tour for Wind and Wuthering, and they're locked in the studio mixing their second live album, Seconds Out.
Which is an intense process. Mixing a live album is a very specific psychological space for a band to be in.
How so?
Well, you're forced to listen to your immediate past over and over and over again. You are literally mastering the era that you're currently in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it often gives the whole thing an air of finality. It's like putting a period at the end of a very long sentence.
And while they're in the middle of mastering that past, Steve Hackett decides, well, he has no future with them. He leaves.
He walks away.
Now, Hackett had already tasted absolute creative control, right? He released a solo album, Voyage of the Acolyte, back in 1975.
Right, he knew what it was like to be the boss.
Exactly. And by 1977, he had just grown increasingly frustrated. He felt that his compositional ideas were being, systematically ignored or diluted by the collective.
And that internal friction over writing credits and sonic real estate, that is the classic band killer.
It always is.
But the psychology of Hackett's departure has this other really fascinating layer to it. Genesis had recently played Madison Square Garden.
Huge milestone.
Massive. Hackett looked around at that sold-out New York crowd, felt the energy in that specific room, and he basically concluded that the group had reached its absolute terminal velocity.
Wait, meaning he thought they couldn't get any bigger.
Exactly. In his mind, they could not go any higher. So you combine that feeling of having peaked with his internal creative frustrations.
And he just walked away.
He did.
It's a really striking mental space to inhabit. You're standing at the summit, the crowd is roaring, and your internal monologue is just calculating that every subsequent step will inevitably be downhill.
Yeah, it's a very analytical way to look at success.
So he leaves, but the band actually sits on the news. The departure isn't made public until October.
Right, because Collins, Banks, and Rutherford are out there doing all the promotional work for the live album.
Which means those 3 had to process this existential threat completely privately before ever facing the press.
And we should emphasize, it truly was an existential threat.
Right.
In progressive rock, the lead guitarist isn't just playing some flashy solos over a basic chord progression. They are a foundational pillar of the composition.
They're providing all those counter melodies that weave through the keyboard lines.
Exactly. Losing Hackett was like removing the load-bearing pillars in the middle of a cathedral. The vaulted ceiling, which in this case is the melodies, suddenly has absolutely nothing holding it up.
Right, so you either have to quickly build, like flying buttresses out of something else, or the whole song just completely collapses.
Precisely.
And what fascinates me is the reaction of the remaining three. I mean, they didn't panic. They didn't hold huge auditions for a new virtuoso lead guitarist.
No, they made a really definitive choice to stay a trio.
From that point forward, they would perform all the instrumental work on their studio albums themselves.
Phil Collins, Tony Banks, and Mike Rutherford looked at the architecture of the band and just decided to close ranks.
But let me push back on that decision for a moment. Doesn't that reek of arrogance?
How do you mean?
Well, specifically for Mike Rutherford. He was their bassist and their rhythm 12-string player. To just assume he could step into the massive sonic void left by Hackett.
Taking over all the lead guitar duties.
Yeah, in a progressive rock band, no less. And without missing a beat. It seems, I don't know, wildly overconfident. He's switching primary instruments on a major label recording. Why not just hire a dedicated professional?
I get that. It definitely looks like hubris from the outside. But what's fascinating here is, if you look at the band's compositional history, it's actually a deeply calculated move based on internal confidence.
Confidence in what, exactly?
Their writing.
Yeah.
These three knew they were the core writing engine. They had formed the backbone of some of Genesis's most acclaimed, complex pieces.
Oh, right. Like the Apocalypse in '98 section from Supper's Ready.
Exactly. Or the instrumental passages of the cinema show. And they also wrote the entire foundation of their A Trick of the Tail album while Hackett was busy making his solo record.
So they already had proof of concept.
They did. They knew their collective chemistry was the actual engine of the band.
Okay, so Rutherford didn't necessarily view taking over the lead guitar as his inherent right, but rather as an internal challenge.
Right.
He figured out that the band's identity wasn't tied to a specific virtuoso's tone, but to the interplay between the rhythm section and the keyboards.
Furthermore, Tony Banks noted this massive hidden benefit to this new three-man setup.
What was that?
Recording as a trio instantly became a much easier, far more fluid experience than it had been when they were a four-piece.
Just less arguing?
Pretty much. The democracy shrank. Every single member suddenly had a clearly defined, indispensable role. Collins is the rhythm and the voice. Banks is the harmonic landscape. Rutherford is the stringed foundation.
Right.
That clarity dramatically reduced the risk of personnel clashes over sonic territory.
I mean, when you have fewer chefs in the kitchen, you don't argue about the recipe as much.
Exactly.
So deciding to close ranks is one thing. Actually getting into a studio to redefine your sound and build those new sonic flying buttresses we talked about, that is a completely different beast.
Oh, absolutely.
Which brings us to the severe constraints of their recording sessions.
Yeah.
They do 6 weeks of rehearsals at Shepperton Studios. And then, in September 1977, they pack up and head to Relight Studios in Hilverenbeek.
In the Netherlands.
Right, in the Netherlands, to record the album. Which is strange because a band going through a massive personnel shift usually wants a fresh start.
Yeah, a new environment to signal a new era.
Exactly. And Relight was the exact same venue they had used for their previous album. Plus, Mike Rutherford explicitly stated he just wanted to stay in London to record. He wanted the comfort of home.
Well, the financial realities of the 1970s British economy dictated otherwise. We have to look at the tax laws of that specific era.
Oh, the tax exile thing.
Yes. The top rate of income tax on earned income in the UK under the Labour government had reached 83%.
83%? That's insane.
It gets worse. On investment income, it could hit 98%.
98%. So you keep 2 cents on the dollar.
Basically. It was a notoriously punitive system for high earners, pushing incredibly successful bands to become tax exiles.
Right. Rutherford actually noted that recording abroad was their, quote, one tax concession.
The government essentially forced them back to the Netherlands if they wanted to keep any of the money they were making.
So commerce dictates the geography. They are in the Netherlands, and they're joined by audio engineer and co-producer David Henschel, sharing the production duties.
And the actual recording of the material was incredibly fast. Rutherford stated the basic tracks were done in just 2 weeks.
2 weeks. That is an insanely tight crucible to redefine your entire sonic identity.
Just basically a sprint.
But the internal dynamic of how they wrote this music had fundamentally shifted. And it wasn't just because Hackett was gone.
Right.
We have to factor in Phil Collins' domestic situation, which dramatically alters the DNA of this whole album.
This is a huge point.
Collins has settled down. He has a wife, 2 children, and they are living in a flat in South Ealing, London. And because of this, he simply did not have the time to bring newly written songs to the initial sessions.
And consider the physical reality of his instrument, too. He is the drummer of a massive rock band.
You can't just play softly.
Exactly. You cannot work out complex, thunderous, progressive rock rhythms in an apartment when your kids are sleeping in the next room and you share a wall with the neighbors.
Right. A keyboardist can plug in headphones, a guitarist can play unamplified.
But a drummer has no volume knob.
So how does a drummer frontman, contributing less to the actual writing sessions, change the DNA of the band's sound? Because we know Collins later lamented that the album lacked the rich, jazzy pieces they used to build from group jams.
Right, those sprawling tracks that brilliantly merged rhythm and melody from the ground up. Well, because they couldn't rely on their old method of just going into a room, improvising for hours, and building an epic song out of the best groove-based bits.
They had to change their whole approach.
Exactly. The tight 2-week recording schedule meant the majority of this album had to be constructed from pre-written songs.
I see.
And with Collins largely sidelined compositionally, Tony Banks and Mike Rutherford became the dominant architects.
It's a huge shift.
Banks actually has sole writing credit on 4 songs, Rutherford on 3. There's one from Banks and Collins, and only 3 tracks were written collectively by the trio.
That is a massive power shift. When you rely on material pre-written by your keyboardist and your bassist, you naturally shift away from organic, rhythm-driven jams.
You move into tighter, highly structured, chord and melody-driven formats.
And this structural shift caused immediate friction in the studio, didn't it?
It did. Rutherford noticed that recording the basic rhythm tracks as a 3-piece, just drums, bass, and a guide keyboard, it sounded incredibly sparse.
Because Hackett's missing.
Exactly. Without Hackett's weaving lead lines filling all those mid-range frequencies, the foundational tracks felt empty. They were almost hard to understand structurally for the band.
So they didn't really know what they had yet.
Right. The vision didn't fully materialize until all the overdubs were heavily layered on later at Trident Studios back in London.
Which is fascinating. This shift from jam-based epics to pre-written, highly structured songs, it perfectly sets the stage for a dramatic change in their musical style.
It does.
Because as much as this was an internal reaction to losing Hackett and dealing with domestic realities, it was also heavily influenced by the massive cultural wave crashing around them outside the studio walls.
We're talking about the punk rock and new wave explosion of 1977.
Right. The band deliberately moved away from their progressive rock roots towards shorter, more concise songs.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the UK music press was ruthlessly turning against progressive rock.
They hated it.
They really did. The 20-minute rock epic, the concept albums about mythology, the extended solos, the cultural vanguard suddenly viewed all of it as bloated, pretentious, and obsolete.
Punk bands were dictating that short, aggressive, direct songs were the only authentic form of expression.
Now, obviously, Genesis wasn't going to suddenly become a punk band.
Right, that would be ridiculous.
But they were acutely aware of the shifting climate, and they also had a very practical motivation that Rutherford pointed out.
Which was?
They simply wanted to be able to fit more musical ideas onto a single vinyl record.
Oh, sure, vinyl has physical limits.
Exactly. If your songs are 10 minutes long, you max out at 4 or 5 tracks. If they are 3 or 4 minutes long, you can showcase a much wider variety of moods, tempos, and stories.
But this decision, however practical, opened them up to immense criticism from their hardcore fans. The accusation was immediate and fierce. So I have to ask you the ultimate music fan debate question.
Let's hear it.
Did they sell out? Even Phil Collins admitted that he understood how this pivot looked to the outside world. He acknowledged the impression that Genesis was aiming to become a, quote, singles band.
Prioritizing commercial radio success over the artistic credibility they had spent a decade building.
Exactly. So, looking at the studio realities we just discussed, is that selling out accusation fair?
I think it's an overly simplistic reading of a very complex situation. The shift to shorter formats was a necessary sonic survival tactic.
Because of the trio setup.
Yes. Remember Rutherford's approach to taking over the guitar duties. He purposely wanted to forge his own style. He was deliberately avoiding Steve Hackett's highly distinctive, complex, sustain-heavy guitar tones.
Right. He utilized sparser, much simpler chordal guitar parts.
And because the guitar was simplified, it created a massive sonic vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. In a rock mix, Tony Banks's keyboards rushed in to fill it.
So the keys took over.
Completely. The album became dominated by Banks's synthesizers, the Yamaha CP70 electric grand piano, and the Mellotron.
Wow.
They weren't just writing shorter pop songs to cynically get on the radio, they were writing arrangements that suited the physical reality of the three musicians left in the room. They had to be tighter because the sprawling instrumentation of their past was literally no longer available to them.
It's not just a commercial pivot. It's an architectural necessity.
Exactly.
To really hear this survival tactic in action, I think we need to dive deep into the specific anatomy of these tracks. Let's look at side one of the record to see how this dynamic played out instrumentally.
And we should specifically focus on this theme of ruthless editing.
Yes. Side one opens with a track called Down and Out, which immediately signals to you, the listener, that things have changed, but the complexity definitely remains.
It's a statement piece.
It is. This is one of the rare tracks written collectively by all three members during those initial rehearsals, and right out of the gate, they prove they haven't abandoned their prog rock math.
Not at all.
Down and Out features a time signature so labyrinthine that Phil Collins actually struggled to explain the riff and the rhythm to their incredibly talented live drummer, Chester Thompson.
And we are talking about a rhythm that alternates between 54 and 74 time.
Right, which is wild.
It is. For a listener, standard pop music is in 44 time. You know, you can easily tap your foot to it. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Super steady.
But when you start dropping beats to play in 54 or 74, the downbeat constantly shifts. It disorients the listener. It creates this very aggressive, stumbling momentum.
Rutherford even joked that his own attempts to help Collins explain the rhythm to Thompson merely added to the confusion.
I can imagine.
But the aggression isn't just in the time signature, it's in the lyrics, too. Collins wrote the words about American record labels dropping artists the moment they are no longer culturally fashionable.
Which is a deeply timely anxiety for a progressive rock band watching the punk explosion render their peers obsolete.
Totally. The verses are sung from the cold, calculating point of view of the record executive who's discarding the artist. It's a cynical, muscular way to open an album.
It sets a tone of survival right away.
It really does. Then we move into the second track, Undertow, written entirely by Tony Banks. And this gives us a brilliant example of their new editing mindset.
Right. Undertow is a relatively simple track structurally. You've got guitar, drums, piano, and a straightforward chorus. Banks heavily utilizes the Yamaha CP70 electric grand piano here.
Which has unique sound.
Very much so. It gives the track a very specific, sharp attack compared to a standard acoustic piano.
But the real story is what isn't in the track.
The missing intro.
Exactly. Originally, Banks had written this massive 2-minute introduction for the song, a long instrumental build, which is classic textbook Genesis.
Oh, yeah.
But during the sessions, the other members pushed back. They looked at this sprawling intro and said, "We already have enough keyboard parts on this album," and they just chopped the entire 2 minutes right off the front of the song.
Which requires a remarkable lack of ego, or at least a newly discovered discipline regarding pacing. In the past, every instrumental idea found a home. Now they are killing their darlings.
The music didn't completely vanish, though, which is cool. Banks reworked that unused intro, and it was actually used as the theme for a horror film called The Shout.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and he eventually released it as a track called From the Undertow, which became the opening track on his 1979 solo album, A Curious Feeling. So the music survives, but it is exiled from the Genesis ecosystem for the sake of the album's flow.
They're being ruthless. Next up is Ballad of Big, written collectively with lyrics by Collins. The musical texture here is fascinating regarding studio experimentation.
The intro sounds so weird.
It does. The introduction features a very strange, wobbly guitar effect.
Right, Rutherford created this sound by literally rubbing pieces of metal against his guitar strings, which he said gave it a, quote, slightly Eastern strain.
But let's look at the mechanism of that.
Right.
When you rub metal against a steel guitar string that's sitting over a magnetic pickup, you aren't just playing a note, you are violently disrupting the magnetic field.
Ah, I didn't think of the physics of it.
Yeah, you're preventing the string from vibrating in its natural harmonic series. It generates these inharmonic overtones, creating that wobbly, unsettling friction.
And then the track just explodes into a massive duel between Banks's electric piano and Rutherford playing a Roland GR500 guitar synthesizer.
They are actively finding ways to generate new sounds without relying on standard lead guitar techniques.
Which brings us to the fourth track, Snowbound, written by Mike Rutherford. And this track features a fascinating manipulation of analog tape.
Tape speed tricks.
Yes. When they first recorded the rhythm section, Phil Collins played his drum part at a considerably faster, more standard rock pace.
Like a normal rock tempo?
Right. But listening back in the control room, the group realized the speed completely undercut the mood of the song. So they had to significantly slow down Collins' entire drum track using Speed tape manipulation to make it work.
And when you slow down analog tape, you don't just slow the tempo, you lower the pitch.
Right, everything drops.
The drums become deeper, sludgier, more lethargic. It physically alters the timbre of the instrument to match the lyrical weight.
And the lyrical weight is bizarre. I mean, Collins and Rutherford describe Snowbound as a romantic song, but the narrative is deeply paranoid.
It's super weird.
It's about a man who wears a snowman outfit to hide from the outside world. But once he is inside the suit, the paranoia just amplifies. He realizes he cannot get out, and he is trapped inside his own disguise.
It's basically a horror story.
A guy trapped in a snowman suit is a very weird, surreal concept squeezed into a tight 4.5-minute pop structure.
Side 1 then closes with another Tony Banks composition, Burning Rope. And here again we see the internal battle between their progressive instincts and their new pop discipline.
How did that play out on this track?
Well, Banks is writing Burning Rope, and he makes a conscious decision to stunt the track's growth. He deliberately stops himself from stretching the arrangements out into a long, extended piece.
To avoid comparisons.
Exactly. He specifically stated he wished to avoid repeating himself, dodging any comparisons to his massive 10-minute epic, One for the Vine, from their previous album.
So he is actively self-censoring the progressive rock out of the song to make it punchier.
He is. Yet it still retains real musical gravity. Mike Rutherford actually claimed that Burning Rope features his best lead guitar solo on the entire album.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Taking the mantle from Hackett was a daunting task, but Rutherford felt he captured something essential here.
Looking at side 1 collectively, listening to Snowbound being artificially slowed down and Undertow having its epic intro decapitated, it's like they were their own ruthless editors.
They absolutely were.
They were trimming the progressive fat to find the pop muscle.
This rigorous editing process really highlights a band rapidly maturing. They are internalizing a critical artistic lesson. What you leave out of an arrangement is often more important than what you leave in.
That's a great point.
The severe constraint of being a trio forced them to evaluate every single inch of tape. Does this serve the core emotion of the song, or is it just technical indulgence?
And on side 1, they systematically execute their indulgences.
Which is exactly why side 1 feels so incredibly tight.
But interestingly, that ruthless discipline actually afforded them the space to get highly experimental and honestly a bit weird on side 2.
Very weird.
Let's shift our focus to the back half of the record, where the personality of the trio stretches out into intricate character studies and deep sonic layering.
Side 2 opens with a Mike Rutherford track originally titled Heavy, which eventually became Deep in the Motherlode.
And we talked about Rutherford's willingness to challenge himself technically. On Deep in the Motherlode, he decides the track needs a bottleneck slide guitar part.
Now, slide guitar requires a very specific touch. You use a glass or metal tube on your finger, gliding it over the strings without pressing down to the fretboard.
Right.
It requires immense pitch control and damping techniques, usually honed by seasoned blues players over years.
And Rutherford was not a seasoned blues player.
Not at all.
He was so entirely inexperienced with a bottleneck slide that when he first tried to record the part, he literally put the slide on the wrong hand.
That's amazing.
He was trying to figure out the absolute elementary physics of the instrument while the tape was rolling on a major label recording session. But that naive trial and error approach gives the song a very unique, slightly precarious texture.
It's the sound of a musician forcing themselves out of their comfort zone. And from there, we move to a Tony Banks track. Many Too Many.
From a gear perspective, this track is a milestone.
It is.
It features the very final appearance of the legendary Mellotron on a Genesis studio album.
And the Mellotron is such a fascinating, archaic beast of an instrument.
It's basically a keyboard that triggers fictional loops of magnetic tape, right?
Exactly. Pre-recorded with violins, flutes, or choirs, it's the instrument that gave early prog rock its haunting, slightly out-of-tune orchestral majesty.
But the technology was becoming obsolete.
Very fast. After the basic tracks for Many Too Many were laid down, the band struggled with the arrangement. It needed more instrumental padding, a wider harmonic bed. They actually considered bringing in a real orchestra at one point.
But They scrapped the orchestra idea. Instead, Banks turned to a Polymoog synthesizer to play a string arrangement.
But he wasn't satisfied with that either.
Right, feeling the Polymoog's basic string imitation lacked depth. So he layered the Polymoog with a Roland string synthesizer and then topped it all off with that final majestic analog blast of the mellotron.
Beyond the gear, there is a brilliant psychological detail about Phil Collins regarding the vocals on this track.
Tony Banks wrote the lyrics for Many Too Many, and the chorus prominently features the word mama. Collins, the drummer and newly minted frontman, was incredibly nervous about singing the word mama on a rock record.
Because it wasn't rock and roll enough.
Basically.
Yeah.
He thought it sounded inherently uncool, wrong, or embarrassing for a rock singer. Banks actually had to pull him aside, sit him down, and reassure him that it was perfectly fine that he could deliver that single, vulnerable word without sounding foolish.
It really humanizes the process. You have this world-class musician who is about to become one of the most ubiquitous pop stars on the planet, dealing with profound insecurity over a two-syllable word.
Following that is Scenes from a Night's Dream, written by Collins and Banks.
The lyrical evolution of this song is just a masterclass in studio problem-solving.
It really is. The initial musical idea came from Banks, based on a childhood dream inspired by the classic early 20th century comic strip character Little Nemo.
Such a specific reference.
Right. Collins had actually bought a book of Little Nemo for his brother, which sparked the concept. Banks sat down and wrote the first draft of the lyrics, but he absolutely hated them. He gave up halfway through, feeling they were completely unsuitable for the music.
So you have a completed instrumental track, expensive studio time ticking away, and absolutely no vocals.
The rescue operation happens during the mixing stage at Trident Studios. During some downtime, Collins just steps up, completely rewrites the lyrics, invents a brand new melody line for the lead vocal, and layers in a complex web of vocal harmonies. He basically salvaged the entire track at the 11th hour.
Next is Say Meet All You, written by Mike Rutherford. And this track is an utter stylistic departure.
It was the penultimate track recorded for the entire album, and it is completely unexpected for Genesis. It is essentially a torch song, a slow, lamenting track about an alcoholic slipping into a drunken stupor.
Right.
Rutherford specifically intended it to be a parody, describing it as a, quote, piss take on the Dean Martin set-em-up Joe alcoholic style.
Thematically, we are light years away from the Victorian landscapes and mythical creatures of their earlier work.
Initially, Rutherford thought the song was a total failure, though. He listened to the basic tracks and felt the parody simply wasn't translating. It felt flat.
So how did they save it?
It wasn't until Banks added all his keyboard overdubs, painting the atmosphere of a smoky, depressing lounge, and they actually started mixing the track that Rutherford felt it finally came to life.
Then we have The Lady Lies, another Tony Banks composition.
The introduction to this song was explicitly designed to have what the band called a stripper's feel to it.
Yeah.
A sleazy late-night groove, which directly informed the title, The Lady Lies.
I mean, when you look at side 2 as a whole, the thematic shift is jarring.
It really is. How does a band go from writing medieval fantasy epics to a song about a drunken Dean Martin stupor, or a guy in a snowman suit, or a track with a stripper's feel?
Their lyrical lens zoomed way, way in.
Exactly. They abandoned the macro mythology and focused entirely on micro-narratives, deeply flawed, everyday, almost pathetic human character studies.
The instrumentation perfectly reflects the zoomed-in, intimate focus, too. While the songs are structurally much shorter, the sonic space is incredibly dense.
Because of all the keyboards?
Right. Because Rutherford was playing those simpler, sparser guitar parts, Banks was working overtime to build the environment. He is utilizing the Roland string synths, the Polymoogs, the Yamaha electric pianos.
Acting as the set designer for these intimate character portraits.
Precisely. They are using a massive synthesized palette to paint very small, very human stories.
While side 2 clearly showcased their quirky experimental character studies, it was actually the final song on the album that would permanently alter the trajectory of their careers.
The unlikely smash hit.
Track 6 on side 2.
Yeah.
The final song on the record, Follow You, Follow Me.
And the sequencing of placing it last is entirely deliberate.
Oh, for sure.
The band planned to close the album on a lighter note. They recognized that the rest of the record was weighed down by heavy, dense, somewhat paranoid themes, and they wanted a melodic, optimistic contrast to end the listening experience.
Follow You, Follow Me has a completely unique origin story compared to the rest of the album. It was the only track on the entire record that was actually written collectively during the initial rehearsal stage.
Oh, it wasn't pre-written.
No. While the rest of the album relied on pre-written structures, this one was jammed out. They kept playing with it, massaging a phased guitar riff before finally settling on a very tight 3-minute pop arrangement built over a deceptively simple drum pattern.
And the lyrical process was astonishingly fast, almost an afterthought.
Mike Rutherford wrote the lyrics. They were simply inspired by his wife. He later admitted that it was the easiest set of lyrics he had ever written in his life, claiming he spent about 10 minutes jotting them down.
10 minutes.
10 minutes for the words to a song that would change their lives.
But the people in the control room didn't immediately recognize the gold they had struck.
Not at all. David Henschel, their co-producer, was highly dismissive of the song. He thought it was too slight, too simple. He didn't think much of it at all. But he went ahead and prepared an initial mix anyway, and he presented it to the A&R staff at their American label, Atlantic Records.
And A&R executives listened for one thing: radio viability.
And their reaction was instantaneous. The executives at Atlantic heard that 3-minute rough mix and immediately recognized it as a massive, undeniable pop hit.
They saw the potential right away.
They essentially demanded it be on the record and prioritized. So the song was remixed and placed at the very end of the album. It really makes you question the entire creative process.
How so?
Well, do artists and producers actually know what their best work is? Or are they standing so close to the canvas, so obsessed with the complex brushstrokes that they can't see the painting? It literally took a guy in a suit at a record label to spot the band's biggest commercial breakthrough.
The impact of Follow You Follow Me cannot be overstated. When it was released as the lead single in February 1978, it became their most successful single since the band formed a decade earlier.
The numbers were huge.
It hit number 7 on the UK charts and broke into the US Billboard charts at number 23.
For a progressive rock band built on 20-minute compositions, landing a top 10 pop hit is a seismic, reality-altering event.
It acted as a bridge. Follow You Follow Me crossed the seemingly uncrossable divide between their old hardcore progressive rock fans and a massive mainstream pop audience.
Right.
It proved Genesis could write a digestible, emotional 3-minute love song that fit perfectly on AM radio without losing their distinct sonic identity. It broadened their demographic appeal exponentially and served as the crucial key that unlocked their eventual status as stadium rock deities in the 1980s.
But having a massive hit single and a completely new keyboard-dominated sound meant they had to take this newly designed 3-legged stool out of the studio and put it on a stage.
The tour.
Taking this album to the masses brought a whole new set of brutal challenges.
We really need to examine the critical divide upon release, the logistics of the tour, and the immense personal toll this success demanded.
Let's start with the release.
Oh.
When and Then There Were Three was released on March 31st, 1978. The critical reception was wildly fractured.
The press didn't know what to do with it.
The music press was deeply confused by the pivot. On one hand, you had Melody Maker. Reporter Chris Welch praised the album, calling it strong and confident, noting the songs possessed a sense of purpose and a remarkably powerful sound.
He liked it.
He specifically championed that weird track with the rubbed guitar strings, Ballad of Big, as his favorite.
Circus magazine also defended them, stating they hadn't sacrificed direction or quality despite Hackett leaving. They noted the magical, mystical sound that still set Genesis apart from other European art rock bands.
But the American critics were absolutely savage.
Oh, they hated it.
Famed critic Robert Christgau at The Village Voice basically declared that without Steve Hackett, the band had lost its only remaining focal point. He described the new album sound as, quote, mushy as the Dread Moody Blues, with fewer excuses.
Which is such a burn. Comparing a band trying to modernize to the mushy, moody blues is a very specific, deeply cutting 1970s rock critic insult. It implies they are antiquated and soft.
Rolling Stone was just as brutal. Michael Bloom in Crawdaddy magazine attacked every single member.
Wow, really?
Yeah. He complained that Tony Banks's melodies tend to practically vanish. He called Phil Collins' singing uniformly insipid, and perhaps most painfully, he declared Mike Rutherford's lead guitar playing unbearably clumsy compared to Hackett. He concluded the album was an interminable frustration.
The traditionalists were furious. They were mourning the loss of the complex, progressive textures they felt defined the band's legitimacy. But while the critics debated their artistic purity, the commercial reality was undeniable.
The public voted with their wallets.
Right.
The album was a massive commercial breakthrough. It peaked at number 3 on the UK Albums Chart, staying on the chart for 32 weeks.
Incredible.
In the US, it reached number 14 on the Billboard 200, making it their highest charting album in America at the time. By February 1988, It was certified platinum in the US for selling over 1 million copies.
But a platinum hit record demands a massive, grueling tour to support it.
And the 1978 tour was an absolute monster. Between March and December 1978, Genesis played nearly 100 shows covering Europe, the US, and Japan. Interestingly, they only played a single UK show, but it was a massive gig at Knebworth Park.
The U.S. dates were the critical financial engine. The band was running touring costs of around $25,000 a day.
Good Lord.
In 1978 money, that is a staggering burn rate. They needed to play massive American arenas consistently just to recoup those costs and finally turn a profit.
But to pull off these new songs live, and more importantly, to play their old Hackett-era progressive classics, they quickly realized the three-legged stool wasn't going to work on stage.
They needed help.
Rutherford was completely transparent. He only wanted to play lead guitar on the new songs. For all the older complex material, he wanted to retreat to playing bass and his signature 12-string guitar.
So the logistical nightmare begins. They need someone who can play bass on the new pop songs, but can instantly switch to playing virtuoso lead guitar on the old prog epics.
Which is a tall order.
Finding a musician who excels at both instruments at a world-class level is incredibly rare.
They initially approached Alphonso Johnson, the brilliant bassist from the jazz fusion group Weather Report. Johnson was an incredible musician, but his style was primarily bass-focused. It didn't quite mesh with the intricate lead guitar requirements of the older Genesis catalog.
Right.
However, Johnson did them the ultimate favor. He suggested they audition a jazz fusion guitarist he knew named Daryl Stumer.
Stumer wasn't just a hired gun. He was already a massive Genesis fan, which meant he understood the architectural importance of the parts he was auditioning for.
They flew Stumer to New York for the audition, and they put him through the ringer. They asked him to play bass on the complex, shifting time signatures of the new track Down and Out, and then immediately switched to lead guitar to play Squonk from A Trick of the Tail.
That's a brutal test.
He nailed the transition so flawlessly that he was hired on the spot. Stumer would go on to become a permanent, legendary fixture of their live shows for decades. They even dug up the 1971 classic The Fountain of Salmacis for the tour, specifically so Stumer could take a famous Hackett solo and put his own unique stamp on it.
The live shows also evolved to match the new material, incorporating more theatricality tied to the character-driven lyrics. For Seuss, it's all right, Joe, that Dean Martin parody we talked about, Collins would perform entirely in character.
Really, like acting it out.
Yeah, he would wear a raincoat and use Tony Banks's keyboards as a makeshift bar, acting out the drunken stupor on stage.
But the success of this 100-show tour came with a devastating, tragic price tag. Yes, it made them financially viable. They finally stopped running at a loss and started making real money. But the personal cost to Phil Collins was cataclysmic.
The demands of the road are inherently destructive to domestic life.
Always.
The tour had several breaks built into the schedule, specifically so the band could go home to their families, but it simply wasn't enough to bridge the gap.
Collins's frequent extended absences became the breaking point for his marriage. His wife felt he was away too often, prioritizing the band over his young family, and she needed him at home.
Which is completely understandable.
This culminated in a massive row, which resulted in canceling plans for her and the children to join him on the Japanese leg of the tour. Collins was absolutely devastated. His family life was collapsing in real time while he was contractually obligated to cross the globe.
He later recalled the Japanese leg of the tour as a nightmare. He went to Japan and spent 10 days completely drunk, spiraling into a deep depression.
He admitted he hated every single minute of it. He physically couldn't sing properly because of the alcohol and the emotional strain.
That is just awful.
Even though the road crew and the band were deeply concerned for his welfare, there was nothing anyone could do to stop the spiral. The machine had to keep moving. He stated later that the end of this tour felt like the end of an era. The success of the album had quite literally broken his life in two.
This raises an important question for you, the listener. It forces you to look at the standard rock and roll narrative of success and question the reality of it.
What do you mean?
Well, Genesis finally gets a platinum record. They finally write a top 10 pop hit. They finally make a profit touring. But the cost is the frontman's family being destroyed, leaving him drinking himself into oblivion in a hotel room in Japan.
It makes you wonder if a massive commercial breakthrough at that level is always intimately tied to a profound personal breakdown.
It highlights the brutal transaction required for that level of fame. The album, and then there were three, is defined by this duality.
It saved them and broke them.
The crisis of losing Steve Hackett saved the band artistically by forcing them to ruthlessly edit themselves and evolve. It made them international superstars, but the relentless demands of maintaining that new superstardom broke the frontman's personal life into pieces.
The profound, almost tragic irony here, looking at the wider scope of music history, is that the very heartbreak Collins suffered in Japan, the dissolution of his marriage caused by this album's touring schedule, would become the direct lyrical fuel for his massive, ubiquitous solo career in the early 1980s.
Right. Songs like In the Air Tonight were born from this exact trauma.
And that solo success, in turn, propelled Genesis to even more monumental stadium success. The breakdown fed the breakthrough, which fed the breakdown, in an endless, echoing loop.
It is an incredible, sobering way to view the machinery of the music industry.
It really is. To bring our journey to a close, and then there are 3 stands as a masterclass in adapting to loss and severe constraint.
Absolutely.
Genesis took the terrifying departure of a foundational member, combined it with the domestic realities of their drummer and the cultural pressure of the punk explosion, and they refused to fold. They ruthlessly edited their most indulgent instincts.
They stepped far outside their comfort zones.
Literally putting the slide guitar on the wrong hand, and built a tighter, keyboard-driven pop rock blueprint that would quite literally define the sound of the next decade.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final detail to consider, drawn from the visual packaging of the album itself.
Oh, the cover art.
Yes. The cover art was designed by Storm Thorgerson and Aubrey Powell of the legendary design firm Hypnosis. Thorgerson explained that they deliberately chose not to use the actual band members for the cover shot.
Really?
Instead, they used models, and they shot the photograph using long-exposure time-lapse photography.
So it's all blurry.
Exactly. The result is an image filled with glowing light trails specifically designed to visually represent the comings and goings mentioned in the album's lyrics, but far more importantly to represent the coming and going of the band's personnel.
It's a literal visual representation of a band's shifting identity in real time.
And this leads to a provocative thought I want to leave you with. Think about the bands, the companies, or the institutions that you follow and love. We naturally tend to view them as fixed, solid, unchanging entities. But are they?
Probably not.
Or are they actually more like that time-lapse photograph on the cover of this album, a continuous, blurry stream of comings and goings? Perhaps the true identity of an institution isn't defined by the people who manage to stay, but rather by how the survivors choose to adapt, innovate, and grow into the empty space left behind.
What a brilliant thought to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the crucible that forged the second life of Genesis. Keep exploring the mechanisms behind the music you love, keep questioning the narratives of success, and always stay curious.